Hi, I'm Asia, and I'll be going over the 9 stages of development that I totally didn't decide to put on off to last minute. And by last minute, I mean today. Totally didn't decide to make a PowerPoint, write a script, voice record, and animate a project in less than 20 hours before it was due. Oh, you're crazy. I didn't do that. Anyways, beginning at the first stage, we have infancy. Physically speaking, this can be marked by a plumper appearance. Physical growth doubles and later triples by the end of the first year. Teething begins as well at this time. I teethed a lot. Like, a lot. I'm the youngest of 4 and I would chew on my sister's fingers constantly. Why her fingers? I just liked how chewy her skin was, I guess. She'd make me stop when my teeth started to show, but I'd sneak and do it anyway sometimes. Unfortunately, we lost most of our family pictures in a flood when I was little, so I don't have many to show, baby pictures especially. Next is toddlerhood, which takes place between 2 to 3 years old. Our minds begin to develop more rapidly, and within the first year of this stage, we tend to learn around our first 50 words. Our language capabilities, including rules and basic sentence structure, flourishes at this time as well. Beyond that, we also begin to develop our sense of self, and can even self-reflect. Our view and way of thinking starts to gain depth, at least enough to grasp that not everyone may think or feel the way we do at a given time. We also begin to acknowledge our potential gender identity. Of course, this isn't concrete and can change and fluctuate throughout life and further maturity, but this does tend to be where that sense is kickstarted. God. Media use in toddlerhood is unsurprisingly high, with 73% of toddlers watching TV alone each day. I wasn't any different, especially considering I was homeschooled during this time. Typically, I'd watch things like Dora and things on Nick Jr. I was feeling really wild Tom and Jerry, but I was limited. I wasn't so limited on the computer, however. By this time, I was already installing games off discs to play, like Roller Coaster Tycoon 2 and Jumpstart. Good times. Early childhood takes from ages 3 to 6. We begin to grow more in height than in weight, which is a luxury I never knew I had. Some children also experience stunting, which is slowed or delayed growth, making them shorter than the average for their age. It affects about 23% of children globally, so it's not very uncommon. Infantile amnesia is the inability to remember anything that happened prior to age 4 to 5. Personally, that's accurate for me, though not everyone. Early traumas can set this in even sooner. Some of my peers and even oldest brother can say this from experience, unfortunately. During middle childhood, our growth slows but steadies out. We have the lowest BMI, or body mass index, during this time. In fact, it tends to be the healthiest stage of our life, even with the amount of injuries we may get through rough physical activity. Myopia, at least that's what I think it's called, develops during this time as well, which is also more commonly known as nearsightedness. Strangely enough, its rate is highest in developed countries like the United States, Japan, Canada, and others. Our gross and fine motor development skyrocket during these years, as does our physical activity, ideally. We possess more agility, strength, balance, coordination. Our reaction time improves dramatically. However, in recent years, there has been an overall decline in physical activity, competing with TVs, computers, and other forms of media or electronics. 60 minutes a day is recommended, though it's not as often achieved as it has been. Prolonged selective attention begins to show during middle childhood as well, beyond the child not wanting to focus. This can be the cause of ADHD or ADD, which are attention deficit disorders. As a matter of fact, I was officially diagnosed with ADD in the 12th grade because unfortunately the latter can be hard to identify. ADHD has the added of the child being hyperactive with clear lapses in behavior. ADD is more silent. Both make it extremely difficult to focus on a single thing at a given time. The one is much more difficult to identify, with it truly being only evident to the child. The most common treatments for these are behavioral therapy or medication, though both combined have proven to be the most effective, and I can speak from experience. Although, if you don't take your medication every day like I don't, you might still end up procrastinating to the day before like I do. Am doing. God, I'm tired. Adolescence, a wonderful time that I totally love, because who doesn't love puberty? Girls at this time experience menarche, their first menstrual period, while boys experience spermarche, their first ejaculation. And just like boys who get to ejaculate their whole lives, girls too get to go through their month-long menstrual cycle for nearly their whole lives, and 2 years sooner than boys. Again, and again, and again, and again. And oh no, the menstrual cycle isn't just 1 week of having a period, it's a whole month of emotions, hormones, and other wonderful symptoms. Really, girls only get about a few days to a week a month where their body isn't flipping shit. I almost broke down crying the other day because the burrito I was trying to roll kept opening up. Anyway, I can bitch about this stuff all day long, so I'll move on. Eating disorders start to rear their heads during adolescence, those being anorexia nervosa and bulimia. Beginning with anorexia, it's characterized by intentional self-starvation. People with this disorder are so cripplingly afraid to gain weight, they deprive their body of the nutrients it needs to develop and sustain itself. These individuals also have a distorted body image, which is often thought to be, oh, I'm a little chubbier than what other people think. But that's not the case. People with a distorted body image see something else in the mirror than what others do. Someone will see themselves as weighing upwards of 300 pounds or more, when in reality they could be as small as 100 or even less. Treating it is harder the longer it goes on, and one of the most difficult to treat of all. Anorexia nervosa is the single most deadly mental disorder there is, more deadly than schizophrenia and its branches, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder. It's a horrible thing. Bulimia is similar in that the individual fears to gain weight, though unlike anorexia, people with bulimia are aware their eating habits are unhealthy. They have episodes in which they binge eat an excessive amount of food, then purge their body by inducing vomiting. This, of course, doesn't work and can damage the teeth from the frequent passing of acid through their mouth. Eating disorders are more common in cultures that emphasize slimness, and almost non-existent in ones where that's not the case. The United States, for example, has had a tendency of making the ideal body type out to be thin, sometimes unrealistically or unhealthily so, causing people, especially women, anxiety that if they're not thin, they have no worth. That is the theory to these eating disorders anyway. Back to the slide, sleep issues skyrocket around this time, with 43% of college students reporting sleep problems. Currently, I'm running on 6 hours of sleep, 2 cups of coffee in. I'd be at 3 if my sister hadn't stopped me and made me take my BPM, which is at 115 beats per minute, and still I want caffeine. Substance abuse also peaks at this time, and car fatalities are the highest, what with most drivers being in emerging adulthood. Inexperience combined with lack of care or being rushed makes for dangerous driving. Identity explorations are just that. You tend to self-reflect and search for who you are in a broad sense. Instability is mainly focused on where you live. You'll likely move the most during this time. Self-focus is being more conscious about yourself, not necessarily in a self-centered way, though more as a personal maintenance. Feeling in between is when... Oh dear, I'm gonna have to cut that. Feeling in between is when you feel like an adult sometimes and not at others, and possibility/optimism is a feel of sense of control over your life. For most people, this is the first stage in their life where they have the opportunity to take control of things that they couldn't before, such as driving, moving out, having a job, and more. The ability to be free is what makes this not quite as bad as it seems to most people. Personally, feeling in between is what I find myself being stuck on. Being 20, going on 21 without having a license, living with my parents. But I'm a semester away from my first degree, get to work and other things I couldn't before, which makes me optimistic. Young adulthood can be, in Western, non-traditional cultures, we'll tend to accept responsibility for ourselves and become more independent. Traditional cultures, for example, Eastern ones, identify becoming an adult as being able to care for one's parents, both literally and financially. Physical changes during this stage include the start of graying, thinning hair, and receding hairline, and the skin becomes looser with the appearance of wrinkles. Our metabolic rate declines as well, making exercise and diet more important than ever, though the typical lifestyle of a young adult, especially in developed countries, is less and less open to these activities. Community involvement is also much higher during this time for young adults with children, especially those who are growing up as well. Many begin to develop a desire to pass on their knowledge, or wish to give something back to people. Middle adulthood takes place in one's 40s and 50s. At this stage, an individual's vision and hearing begins to decline, and the body virtually begins to slowly go downward. The rate of such is heavily influenced by diet and exercise. Remember how I said women deal with the menstrual cycle for most of their life? Well, thankfully, we have menopause, where it begins to end through the experience of hot flashes, headaches, dizziness, and a gradual infertility, and symptoms that can be so severe as to need hormone replacement therapy. Sarcasm aside, in a lot of cultures, menopause is seen as a good thing, and is welcomed, enjoyed, and even celebrated. While men don't have menopause, their testosterone levels lower, as does their sperm quality and quantity. During middle adulthood, we tend to accept ourselves and our identity, to terms with who we are. To the opposite of that, we have the midlife crisis. This term was coined by Carl Jung. You've probably heard of this throughout media, specifically TV, and even more specifically sitcoms. Characters going through midlife crises will be hysterical, trying to act like an age they aren't, in order to avoid the reality that they're well past the middle of their life, and that their body is on a perpetual slope downward with no real way of stopping it, but only slowing it. Now, not to say that no one goes through such a period of this fear, but it's not quite like what is portrayed to be. In fact, there's no consistent evidence of it existing at all. Most people don't have it, and those that do, it's usually not this extreme. Lastly, we have late adulthood, ages 60 and up. Technically, there are 3 substages to this, being young old, old, and oldest old, but screw that. Physical changes in late adulthood are comprised of primary aging and secondary aging. Primary aging is inevitable. Biological changes that can't really be avoided, just slowed if that. Secondary aging are effects that result from one's lifestyle, things that we do or did have control over. This can come from things such as smoking, poor diet, and other habits. Some forms of primary aging is thinning bones, especially in women, teeth yellowing, hearing and taste begin to decline further, and with a decreasing sense of smell as well, dangerous scents may not be detectable. Aging as healthily and successfully as one can depends on several factors, the main one being maintaining physical health and cognitive, brain-stimulating functions, even if it's merely a puzzle or word search. Staying engaged with life also has health benefits all their own, whether it be you going out and spending time with others, or simply going to the park by yourself. Of course, as with everything, genetics do play a part here as well. You can't control your own genetics, but you can control aforementioned habits. And that's my project. I could have done something much easier, but that'd be the smart thing to do with less than a day before it's due. And college is about exhausting yourself at every possibility, even when you don't have to. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some in-betweening to do and WoW to play. Just kidding, I recorded this before drawing and animating. It's 7 o'clock p.m. and I still have that to do.